Hi everyone and welcome. We're in my wormery and it's time to break down this nursery bin. And this is a nursery bin as well, but this nursery bin had been set up for a time lapse and it's a little bit hard to see, but the areas were broken up into 3 separate compartments to raise worms from cocoons, from eggs. And the 3 types of worms that were placed in here were the African nightcrawlers, the red wigglers, and the European nightcrawlers. And over the course of about 70 days, a time lapse was prepared to show the bin as the cocoons hatched and the worms started to populate the bin and start to eat and start to break down material and so on and so forth. So the time's come now to empty this bin. On the same token, this bin right here was launched a day or 2 after this was started, also with cocoons. These are European nightcrawlers. So I've got European nightcrawlers here and here. I've got red wigglers, which are the type of worm that I have throughout my wormery for the most part. And it's this segment over here that has African nightcrawlers in it. So I've got 3 different destinations for the worms in these containers. I've prepared a couple fresh, slightly larger buckets. They're actually pots that plants were growing in at one point. To house the different types of night crawlers. I'm going to take the European night crawlers from here and the African night crawlers from here to launch off those 2 new buckets. And then all the other worms in here, these red wigglers and these European night crawlers, they're going to be launched off into another bin that I prepared in my last video, which is my new outdoor bin. So it's always interesting to see how the material inside of one of these looks. So before we go ahead and relocate the worms, we're gonna tear this bin apart. So I'll reset things here for that purpose. I'll set up a bucket into which we can place the worms after we've emptied them from this container. And even before we move these worms into their new home, we'll dump out the contents of this as well, so we can get a good sense of how things have progressed over the past 75 days. I believe that this has been in action, and slightly longer for this bin. This bin has been in action for maybe 1 or 2 days longer. So it should be interesting. So let's get to work on this. So to begin with, we're going to go ahead and we're going to empty the compartment on this bin that has the African night crawlers in it. Usually this stuff is fairly compact, so it might be easiest for me to try to pry it out using this stick over here. So I'm going to start trying to see if I could dislodge the contents of this section of the bin and try to get it all out into here so we can check it out. Looks like we're getting the majority of it out. This bin started out with, in each chamber, 100 cocoons of each type of worm. So what we're seeing here should be the population as it has grown over the past couple months, of 100 cocoons hatching. Okay. So after this much time, I'm not entirely sure how big the worms should have grown to, but these are night crawlers, so they should be pretty good sized worms. At least when they mature, they should be. So we're going to pick through here a little bit and see if we can see some of the worms in here. Kind of hoping to find a section where they're all kind of hanging out together, but I only see 1 or 2 here or there. So here's one pretty small little worm. Here too, a pretty tiny worm. So I don't really know how much time it should take for an African nightcrawler to get to full size, but from what I can tell, these worms are still pretty puny. When I had created the time lapse, the video is kind of zoomed in, so it kind of gives that impression that the worms are perhaps a little bit larger than they actually are. So I was under the impression that we'd be seeing somewhat larger worms in here. But it is a bit difficult to tell exactly how many there are. There was really no concentration of food, so we're not going to find them all pooled up in one particular spot. But yeah, these little guys, they're still pretty tiny as far as I'm concerned. I was always under the impression that nightcrawlers were a little bit larger in size. So, yeah, this is pretty cool. I don't really intend to try to separate the worms from the compost at this stage. My intention was just to take all of this material as it is, with the worms in it, and place it into the new habitat so that they can still, you know, be in the material that they're accustomed to or have been growing up in since they were born. And then at their own pace, they'll be able to just sort of venture down into the rest of the material within the bin. And I believe that they're going to be motivated to do so anyway, because you know, the bin is all freshly built and there's a nice stash of food in there for them. So yeah, why don't we go grab the new container that these little guys are going to be placed into, and move them over. Alrighty, so here we have it. It's a big, pretty pink bucket. Well, it's really a pot. It's a pot that some plants were sold in originally, and it's a nice size. It's a little bit bigger than most pots. It's I don't know, it's got to be almost a foot tall, at least 6 inches deep. 6 inches deep as far as the material that I've set up for them. Maybe not, maybe about 4 or 5 inches deep here. But I am going to pile some leaves on top once this is done, and then there'll be a couple layers of paper and whatnot on top of that. So here we go. I'm just going to bring over the stuff that we pulled out, worms and all. I'm just going to see how I can simply pick up and plop over the material and the worms all together. I wonder if the size of the worms in here could be because of the limited space they had. I don't know what really influences the size of worms growing. I thought I heard something somewhere at some point that worms do grow big when there's no competition, but maybe because of the cramped quarters and the great deal of competition, they might not have grown very large. So I don't know too much about it, just speculating. But I think we've got pretty much all of them in here at this point. Just want to make sure I don't leave any behind. Alrighty, that's the last of them. So, okay, so last thing I wanted to put in here was a layer of leaves for them. Alright, so on top of that I have this coffee filter, which just happens to be pretty much the perfect size to fit on there, and a piece of newspaper folded up to be round in shape. And to cap it all off, just put a little piece of cardboard on there like so. Okay, so that makes it official. Our African nightcrawler bucket is now underway. Okay, so now I've given this container a little bit of a rinse, just so we can start sort of fresh. It's not clean per se, but it has been rinsed. And I figured for this one we would proceed to the European nightcrawlers. So the one we just did were the African nightcrawlers. We're going to do the European nightcrawlers next. And those are the ones that are presently living in this little bucket. So we're just going to kind of take out some of these larger chunks of cardboard that are in here. And I guess for that matter, maybe I'm going to take some of this drier leafy material off the top as well, Because then we could just use this leafy material as the topping of the new container that they're being relocated into. Alright, so here it goes. It'll be quick and easy that way. I should be able to just scoop out the rest of the material and remaining worms from the bucket using my hand. Okay, I think we got them all. Oh, there's a little tiny guy. Make sure we don't miss anybody. Okay, now we've got everyone. So now let's just take a quick peek through here to see how things are progressing. Volume, as far as size is concerned, this is a slightly larger container than that small segment of the three-way time-lapse container. And okay, it's also notable to say that this was started with more than just 100 cocoons. This was started with 500 cocoons. So chances are we'll see more worms in here. See some of the food items that were used to feed these little guys, some corn pieces. Here's another piece of corn right here. They seem to be making some pretty good progress of it. But the other thing I'm kind of noticing offhand is just the basic size of them. They're definitely larger in size than the other night crawlers that we just pulled out of the other bin, the African night crawlers. This is actually my first experience dealing with night crawlers, so I really don't know that much about them in terms of what size to expect them to grow to. But as far as you know, comparing them to the African night crawlers that we just saw in the other container, these do seem like they're a little bit bigger than the ones that we just removed from the other container, the African night crawlers. So I don't know if it's just a difference between African night crawlers and European night crawlers, that the European maybe is a little bit larger worm, or maybe the African night crawlers that we just saw are still small because of maybe something to do with environmental conditions. I really don't know that much. So this looks pretty good. I like the way they're breaking down the material. I like the number of worms. I like the way they're growing in size. The one thing that was a little bit off, which I took care of yesterday, was the moisture level in this container. The moisture level was a bit high. I was actually able to pour off maybe about a half a cup worth of standing water from this little tiny bin. I didn't really realize there was so much in there. But I started growing suspicious when I took a peek on the bottom, and it did seem like there was standing water. So I tipped over the container and I let it drain for about an hour, and about a half a cup's worth of liquid did come out. So even though this material is a bit moist right now, it was much more moist yesterday. All right, so let's set this aside and get their new habitat out here and move them in. Okay, so here again, we're using another similar big pink pail or pot, planter, whatever you want to refer to it as. But in this case, the way I'm going to distinguish the European night crawlers is that the European bucket has this tag on the side of it. Maybe I'll put a better label on them at some point, or maybe put a date sticker on the container like I normally do. But we'll do what we just did with the other one as well. We're going to, I guess I'll just move over these couple hunks of corn. And this bin was built like any other worm bin. It's layers of bedding and food and stuff down in there for them. So I'll just start grabbing a handful at a time of what we just removed from the little green bucket and get it all in here. All right. Very nice. So, like we said earlier, this leafy material that we pulled off the top, slightly drier stuff, we're just going to go ahead and sprinkle that over the top here. And I'm just going to go ahead and grab another handful of fresh leaves out of my leaf supply box here and just supplement that with just a little bit more to give them a good solid covering over the top. So now volume-wise, we've definitely got more in here, and it's fair because we do have what's most likely 5 times as many worms in here, since there were theoretically 5 times as many cocoons used to launch off this this population. All right, so we're going to cover up the same way as we did previously. Is we'll place in a coffee filter, piece of newspaper, and a cardboard top. Okay, that's all the nightcrawlers, and well, not all the nightcrawlers. Those are all the worms that are going to be put into these pink pots. What remains are the ones that are going to be used to populate my outdoor bin. So let's get started with those. Okay, so once again, I've given this container a little bit of a rinse, and the last portion of this migration for these worms is going to be the emptying of this. So yeah, we've still got these last 2 segments in this time-lapse bin, red wigglers and the European nightcrawlers. So I'm not worried about the European nightcrawlers. That population of 500 that we just moved out of the green bucket are going to be satisfactory, just so I can have a population of them. Red wigglers, them too, I've got tons of them on the in all my other bins. So I'm going to be using all the worms that come out of here to populate my new outdoor bin. So let's see what I can do to carefully evict these worms from their current space. So from below, I was able to push out this sort of inner chamber that the red wigglers are occupying right now. So that was easy enough. And I guess I could sort of open that up and empty them out. But let me see if I can somehow get the European nightcrawlers out as well. Let's see here. There's another little piece of plastic down there to prevent anything from dropping out the bottom. Oh, I think I got a good hunk of the very bottom here. I'll try and do this in such a way that I don't snap this stick in half. The material is a little bit drier than I expected it to be. Alrighty. And for that matter, it even has a little bit of a funky odor, and I guess that kind of makes sense since there's been really no airing out of the material or anything like that. Usually in all my bins, I give everything a good agitation, a good little stir once in a while to keep everything aerated. But in this case, everything's just been collecting and settling and not getting any sort of airflow for quite some time now. So it's probably just in time that I got this stuff depopulated and give these guys a little break and get them into a nice fresh habitat. So some of the original materials that I built the bin out of, some newspaper here, still seems to be intact, and it seems like they're actually using that as a source of food, because I can see a whole bunch of them around the newspaper. Let's see what else we can see. I'm kind of making that similar observation at this point. So I mean, if you compare the European nightcrawlers that we just extracted from that little green bucket, which is granted a small bucket but still larger than the space that this material was occupying, those European nightcrawlers appear to be a little bit bigger than the ones you see in here. So they're fairly abundant. I could see them in here crawling around. So, you know, here's one right there. There's one right here on the stick. There's one right here, but I don't see any that are very large in size. Certainly can't compare them to the ones that we just pulled out of the out of that other bucket. So it's interesting to see how the size of their space appears to have some influence over how large they grow in size. Or at least that's just a theory I have at this point. I don't know if anyone can back that up or knows for sure if that's true or not, but that's just my observation initially here, just from looking at what we have. So why don't we move over to the red wiggler container. So red wigglers are the normal type of worm that I use around here in all my other worm bins. So let's just see how many of these little guys we can get out of here. And then maybe at some point I'll rinse out the larger container as well as this little inner mini container. And maybe I'll do that right over my garden, so any worms that are still in this material and get rinsed off, they'll just go right into my garden and they'll be set free. Okay. Alright, so this is the this is just like a paper thin piece of melon skin. This is what was on the very tippy top of the material. I had laid down some watermelon with the skin up. So they came up from below and they stripped all of the meaty, fleshy part of the watermelon off and left this paper thin piece of outer skin, which is pretty interesting to see. So now, red wigglers are the types of worms I'm generally accustomed to seeing. And they're not very large worms, as far as I'm concerned. Or at least not compared to what I've seen in other people's videos when I consider comparing them to nightcrawlers. Nightcrawlers, I believe, are just in general a larger type of worm, but here too, you know, these worms all seem so tiny to me. They seem like newborns practically. So I don't know why that is, but again, I'm sort of reverting back to my original theory, which might have something to do with just the basic limitation on space. And the fact that they were living in a fairly small environment, so maybe because of that, none of the worms ever really grew to a large size. So all I'm seeing in here is a whole bunch of little itsy bitsy worms, red wigglers and European nightcrawlers. Alright, it's pretty cool. So the final step is going to be to move these guys outside, out into the outdoor worm bin. So why don't we go ahead and take care of that, and then we'll be done. Okay, so this leads us to where I've positioned my outdoor bin. It's back here next to the old defunct back entrance to the stairs that used to lead up to the upstairs. There's now a new outdoor stairs, and this stairwell's actually been blocked off and boxed in. So it's the doorway that leads to nowhere. So now here's the outdoor bin that I built the other day, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to drop in the worms. Nothing too glamorous to do here, I guess, other than just dump it over. It seems like the easiest way to go about it. Oh, let's see, did we get them all? Looks like we might have left one behind here. But we also kind of caught the edge here a little bit, make sure we don't have any guys that are up here left out hung to dry. So yeah, I'm not going to go too crazy with this. I'm not going to do anything other than just leave them be and let them burrow down and let them make themselves at home. And then I've got a couple pieces of cardboard that I fashioned as lids for this thing, so I'm going to cover this thing up and leave it be. And this is the start of my new outdoor bin. Combination of European nightcrawlers and red wigglers. So that's it for now, folks. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. Wish me luck on my new outdoor bin, and if you did enjoy the video, then I always appreciate a thumbs up, give the video a like, and also consider becoming a subscriber to the channel. That's always appreciated as well. So thanks for following along and keeping me company, and hopefully we'll see you back here next time. Thanks everyone. Bye.